everybody, welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be simulating prehistoric North America. Will I find a way, or is it all doomed to die? To find out and hear the true story, we have to go back to day 1. I released the first species on day 1, the Gigantoraptor. These Gigantoraptors would end up being able to defend their territory fairly well. And since the Gigantoraptors were nearly the size of the local trees, they wouldn't make themselves an easy prey. But they soon got into a fight on who would be the dominant leader of the Gigantoraptor pack. And just like that, there was a new leader of the Gigantoraptors. And not too long away from the Gigantoraptors were a herd of Pachyrhinoceroses. These dinosaurs would be able to blend into their territory and be able to defend themselves. And soon after that, the first snowfall of winter had come. The Pachyrhinoceroses might not do too well in the snow, but the Gigantoraptors for sure would. But new weather brings new herbivores, and new herbivores brings new predators. Our ecosystem's first predator, the Utahraptor. They would likely do well in the snow due to their bulky build and thick feathers. It was starting to snow more and more, but luckily for the dinosaurs, the snow wasn't sticking. The Pachyrhinoceroses were agitated because of the snow, and because of that, they started battling to see who would get kicked out of the herd and who would be the leader of it. The green Pachyrhinosaurus had a good hang of it, but the brown one wasn't letting down. Until he just didn't have any more power left in his body and had to retreat. He was no longer welcome in their herd, unless he challenged the herd leader. Later that evening, the Utahraptors couldn't find any prey. But the Gigantoraptor is an omnivore, so they were doing just fine. The new leader of the Pachyrhinoceroses was taking a rest. And later that night, the Utahraptors had gotten into a fight for dominance. There was a new leader of the Utahraptors. Even later in the night, I introduced the Draco Rex. The Draco Rex would make an easy meal for any carnivore that was hungry, but they would have to watch out for the stone-hard head. Even later in the night, I introduced the Iguanodon. It was finally morning, and the Gigantoraptors were doing great. The exiled Pachyrhinosaurus had made it back into the herd. And right at morning, it started to snow. Later in the morning, I I introduced the Gallimimuses. It was officially the dead of winter, which means they would start getting frequent low-temperature storms. But things like the Utahraptor and Gigantoraptor would do just fine. In fact, they would thrive. But things like the Pachyrhinosaurus or Gallimimus might not do so well. Two iguanodons had gotten into a fight to see who would be their leader. And just like that, there was a new leader of the iguanodons. But a Gallimimus has gotten frostbite. The snow had finally stopped, but that doesn't mean it would melt quite yet. But by the time the Albertosauruses have arrived, it has melted, long gone. The Albertosaurus was a dangerous predator. And now that it's in our ecosystem, there's no telling what will happen. It was starting to snow, and this was the Albertosaurus's first snow. Meanwhile, there was a new vicious predator coming in, the Concavinator. And not too long after that, I released the Pachycephalosauruses. The Pachycephalosauruses had already claimed tons of territory since there's power in groups. Later that night, an Albertosaurus was stalking an iguanodon. The iguanodon was lucky that the Albertosauruses were just passing by. And for our first predators, the Utahraptors were starting to get hungry. The Gigantoraptors were socializing, and they were doing just fine. As of now, they're the oldest dinosaurs in our ecosystem. But that title might not last so long. Concavinators. But maybe they weren't here for the Gigantoraptors. Maybe they were here for something different. Dracorex. Later that morning, the Utahraptors were hunting a Gallimimus. And the hunt was successful. Meanwhile, the Gigantoraptor noticed the Concavinators were in their territory and killed one. When they noticed they were being killed, they decided to go for an easy meal, the Dracorex. The Concavinator won, but he didn't get his food. And an Albertosaurus killed a Pachyrhinosaurus. The Albertosauruses were on a killing spree. They were nearly putting the Pachyrhinosauruses to extinction. Another Pachyrhinosaurus was down. The last Pachyrhinosaurus just happened to be the one that got kicked out of the herd ages ago. And the Utahraptors were going on another hunt. A successful hunt, if you will. Before, the Pachyrhinosaurus blended in fairly well, but now that it was winter, he would stick out like a sore thumb. An easy spot for the Albertosauruses. The Gigantoraptors were omnivores, so during winter, when they couldn't eat any greens, they could eat on meat. And I decided to release a new species, the Triceratops. On the other side of the ecosystem, I released another species, the Tarbosaurus twins.
And impressing other Triceratops. This animal is an herbivore. It can be a system to
A truly dangerous animal, the Tarbosaurus is. Meanwhile, a Triceratops had gotten hypothermia. This iguanodon was right next to a Tarbosaurus, and it didn't even know it because of how well they camouflage. And later that snowy day, I released the T-Rex. Meanwhile, not too far away, a Tarbosaurus was hunting a Dracorex. It was able to ambush the Dracorex easily from the forest. And a Utah raptor had failed a hunt. On the bright side, the snow was melting. And that means that the Tarbosauruses would be at their peak for blending in. And two Triceratopses were fighting for dominance. One with hypothermia, and the other completely healed. The Triceratops with hypothermia had won, and a T-Rex had just killed an iguanodon. Later, the same T-Rex was on the hunt for a Pachycephalosaurus. Later in the night, the two Tarbosauruses were interacting. Later in the night, an Albertosaurus and Triceratops had gotten into a fight. The Triceratops backed down with its life. The Utah raptors were starving, and it was snowing. They killed all of the prey in their area. And a Concavenator had killed a Dracorex. The Dracorexes were on the brink of extinction. The last Pachyrhinosaurus was doing fine. Its comfort levels weren't the best, because it was lonely, for it was the last of its species. It was so lonely, in fact, it decided to challenge an Albertosaurus to a fight. To the death. Just so it wouldn't be lonely anymore. An Albertosaurus was hunting a Draco Rex, but the Draco Rex went under it. A T-Rex and Tarbosaurus had gotten into a fight. The T-Rex backed down with severe wounds. And an Albertosaurus had killed a Triceratops. A Gigantoraptor was defending its territory from a Tarbosaurus. The Tarbosaurus won. I honestly have no clue why, but a Gigantoraptor killed a Triceratops. And a T-Rex had killed a Utahraptor. And a Tarbosaurus and severely injured T-Rex had gotten into another fight. One the T-Rex would not live through. And a Tarbosaurus and Albertosaurus had gotten into a fight while it started snowing. The Albertosaurus had won. And, well, to heal, it decided to lay down behind the body of a dead Triceratops. It would keep it warm for now. And a Triceratops had killed an Albertosaurus. Later, while the snow was melting, the Albertosaurus had killed a Tarbosaurus. And a T-Rex had killed a Gigantoraptor. And to survive under the most extreme conditions, the Utahraptor had to eat off of what was left of his friend's dead carcass. And a T-Rex had killed a Concavinator. And I released a new species, the Nazutoceratops. Later in the morning, a Tarbosaurus had gotten into a fight with an Iguanodon and had been killed by the Iguanodon. I introduced a new species, the Euoplocephalus. Later in the day, the Utahraptors found a few more remaining Gallimimus hiding in the forest. And a Nazutoceratops had gotten killed by an Albertosaurus. There was one final Gallimimus, and it had escaped from the Utahraptor territory. And that's it. We've made a successful ecosystem in North America with apex predators like the Albertosaurus, surprising deaths, dinosaurs that were here until the very end, to the dinosaurs that were here for a surprisingly short amount of time. I'm talking to you, Nazutoceratops. We've made an evenly balanced ecosystem, and I think that's where I'll leave it off for today's video. So long, folks. Bye.